Hi, CFA. My name is Ben Summers. I'm a supervisor in Edinburgh, England, and I've been digging in archaeology for 6, 7 years or so, and a member of the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists for 1 and a bit. I was an associate member. In that time, I've worked for lots of different units, mostly on the eastern side of England, as well as in the Middle East, and I've experienced various levels of training, ranging from pretty good to non-existent. Mostly the non-existent ones tend to be when I was just purely field team and not in the office ever. Which I have noticed overall is that if you're in the office, you get noticed a bit more, and you do tend to get training slightly more regularly. Even though you should really get more on site, because you do actually have more to learn, particularly about asbestos and other health and safety things relating to site. One thing I have noticed is that better training tends to come when there is a consensus between management and the staff that they want to be trained and they want to get involved in training. One company I work for in London were very good at doing that and really put themselves out from the management side, but with the expectation that the field team would also engage. And it only works if the field team want to engage in that training. It was half it was on site time and half was on our own time. So we had to put our effort in ourselves in our own time to do some of that training, but it was worthwhile because we learned a lot more about various phases of London archaeology and various phases of commercial archaeology itself, and methods of practice, which is really helpful. And that's also come out of other places. When I worked in Cambridge, we've set up a exterior methods and theory session for anybody who's interested. It doesn't have to be commercial archaeologist or academic archaeologist or whatever. So to come along and learn about current practices and methods in the field, and that's been pretty successful. But again, it involves working in your own time to do that. But I think if you're interested in the subject, that's important to do as well. There should be formal training within the site, particularly looking at health and safety matters and looking at the archaeology you're working with. So if you're on a Bronze Age site, there should be targeted training to teach you about how the Bronze Age people worked. Particularly if it's a farmstead site, there should be some sort of introduction to Bronze Age farming techniques and methods. Or if it's a Roman villa, some sort of discussion about how Roman villas were formed and how they changed throughout the Roman Empire would be good as well. But equally, then I think you have to go and do your own research and actually put together some work. I'd like to see more units setting up between units, looking at in cities that have got lots of different units, looking at having multi-unit research sessions and seminars looking at archaeology, different time zones, different periods, and different themes. Would be very good. We were quite successful in Cambridge, and the London one that the company I worked for ran was very successful for those people who wanted to go along. But equally, I think the management have to put more effort into training their staff on, particularly in the field, because otherwise people feel disenfranchised and they feel disengaged. And when a small amount of training does come around, they don't take it up because they don't see the point, and therefore no one gains, because the management don't get a more professional, more educated, more committed team, because the field team don't feel valued and the field team don't get anything from their actual work. So I think it's for both parties to actually do the work.
I was trained for my job by taking place in training excavations, which I paid for myself. If I needed to learn anything new, such as single context recording, I was generally helped by fellow excavators on the site. In some cases, a supervisor would also tell me how to do stuff. I I've passed on my own knowledge to other field archaeologists by training them in particularly single context recording if they needed any help with it. This has been recognised by my supervisors, but that's as far as it ever gets. Training fellow diggers is something you just basically do on site without any thanks from the company involved. No, I haven't been continually trained or supported to increase my skills and knowledge. I've paid for my own training in new technologies, which I've then brought back to the industry. Archaeology companies tend to not have interest in training their staff because it costs them time and money which could be used on site.
Experience on site was at Roxter with the late great Philip Barker. I was 16 and perhaps didn't realise how fortunate I was at the time to be trained by him. But then I suppose the day-to-day supervision and training was more by people like Mike Corbishley and Roger White and some others. But that was a great training experience for me. I learned an awful lot in a quite a short space of time, and it definitely confirmed in me the desire to pursue a career in archaeology. And then of course undergraduate training digs. If I'm honest, maybe I didn't learn a huge amount on that. Maybe that was my own failings as an undergraduate student. But for me, I suppose the biggest, the steepest learning curve was when I went to work in commercial archaeology around the turn of the millennium. Without naming units and individuals, I was fortunate enough to work with some very inspirational archaeologists, a handful of quite rough diamonds hewn out of Manpower Services Commission days. They took that apprenticeship style learning forward, and that's how they supervised their sites. They were supervisors or project officers, I guess. So that was a really steep learning experience for me. Do I train anybody? Yes. Obviously, I've been running the training excavation or research and training excavation in Georgia for 15 years or something, and working on various other training excavations. I would say it's an integral part of my job. I'm actually happier, I would say, teaching and training on site than I am in a lecture theatre, and it's very rewarding, and I hope that my students feel they've benefited from that experience. I suppose the other thing, do I think the statement incorporation to CIFRA policy will make a difference? I'd like to think that it would make a difference. It's about time that skills of site staff are more widely recognised and appreciated, and we need to move towards a situation in which those skills are properly appreciated. But I don't know whether it will make that much of a difference in the short term. But it's a step in the right direction.
You alright, guys? My name's Joe Armett, and I did about 4 years of commercial archaeology before moving on to a related heritage industry. When I was first being trained to do my job, it was usually kind of hit and miss while digging. Often when it was raining, it's when you get the best recording training because everyone just sits in the cabin. That happened with the PO and a supervisor, I think, on my first large site. General on and off training. It's none of this kind of official stuff. The only really official training that I really got was with CAT scanning. That was the second company that did that, and it was more in a kind of like building sites kind of set of training. The only training that I've done for other people is and obviously like total stations and that kind of like survey stuff you need for site, but that didn't necessarily up to speed with when you start in commercial. And the only stuff I really trained myself was just kind of like the ins and out of, context sheets and that kind of stuff for new staff or from people green out of uni. Recognition. The supervisor said thank you. I don't feel like we were getting a lot of continuing training. I don't think a lot of diggers feel like they have like any kind of training plan or anything. It tends to be as and when there's downtime. I think this is actually how a lot of people end up doing like post-deck supervisor stuff, is because there's just some downtime and that's what they fall into doing. And I feel it needs to be a little bit more organised than that. I think that some like more wider kind of like training needs to happen in commercial archaeology. And I think a lot of the units that have connections with academic institutions, for say some of the post-deck stuff or surveying stuff, could do with working with them. And I know like all the units are very well experienced staff, but perhaps not all of them are perhaps great at teaching. So maybe some kind of work with the academic unit, academic stuff. Also, perhaps having training that isn't just so you're going to do some post-deck stuff because there's nothing better to do at present. That being a little bit formalised, so the field staff can feel like their careers are going somewhere. Same with more specialist equipment like geophys, laser scanning, drones and that kind of stuff. It's all the kind of things that help diggers feel like they're actually valued by a unit and that they're not just kind of stuck in the same hole continuously. I think the statement with Steve being made part of Steve's policy that that training needs to be part of what units do with their staff is great in theory, but if it's not enforced, it's not worth the paper it's written on. So if it's enforced, if it actually happens, if it's something that we can see happening in the field, that'd be great. It's interesting from my point of view because in the work that I'm doing now, there's quite large training programs for both the staff and the volunteers that we work with, whether that's in specialising in particular aspects of our job or kind of working with our volunteers. So I think it'd be nice if units can do something similar, and obviously there's only so much they can do due to budgetary restraints and all that stuff, but these things need to start happening if diggers just feel like they're still actually part of the industry and not just legwork. Cool. Thank you.
I found that when I was working as a site assistant, there was very little training given. Some essential training like asbestos was given, which was good, but it seemed there was little drive for me to develop further than what can be considered a digging monkey. When I moved to PO, it was a different story. I was given a lot of initial training, mostly via SPO and PM. I do not really train anyone as our office is too small, otherwise I would be. I am trained and pushed to increase my knowledge. I think this stems from the size of our office.
Although I was trained at university, I don't think I was ready to go straight into a full archaeologist position within a commercial unit. So I was quite lucky to get a position with quite a small unit of the 9-month trainee placement, which included completing the level 3 MVQ in archaeological practice. So the training program it was 9 months long, and it involved all sorts of aspects from the field, as well as working with the HERs and a lot of post-ex work as well. So I got quite a good rounded training program within that 9 months, and then at the end of it, once I'd completed it and got the MVQ, I was offered an archaeologist position. I think it was certainly helped by the fact that it's quite a small unit, and a lot of the guys that I was working with, they had got a lot of years' experience behind their belt, and I was often working in teams of 3, 4, 5, which just allowed me to really get as much knowledge off those guys as I could. Now that I'm in this archaeologist position, I do help assist training other people. We've recently taken on 2 more new trainees, and I think as a collective, it's all of our responsibility to help train new staff, and we work together on that. I am supported to increase my skills and knowledge. Again, I think this is helped by being part of a small team, and I've started report writing now, and moving on into undertaking solo projects.
I was trained through voluntary work and learning on the job. I learn best by doing something, so I would watch others and copy, and ask lots of questions. I have been mostly trained by others at PIFA level, and they were just archaeologists, the same as me. I do train other people where needed, albeit informally and on the job. I feel I can always ask for help, but I mostly learn on the job as and when. However, time and money do not allow formal training courses at the moment. I think some ROs will take it seriously, but from past experience some companies use trainees as cheap labor, and do not bother to train them properly, and unfortunately from experience some smaller companies are not ROs or members of CIFA. I received on-the-job training, as it was a community archaeology placement. I was trained by the archaeology curator. I trained volunteers on how to use the various handling collections, and this was recognized, as it was part of my work plan. I was continually supported by the archaeology curator to increase my skills and knowledge. Not only the care, conservation and use of archaeology collections, but other collections as well, such as geology and costumes. I do think this policy will benefit the profession as a whole, not just those working in field archaeology. The better trained we all are, should hopefully mean that we can justify higher wages, which would make this a more sustainable profession.
I was trained during a university training excavation, a placement module with a commercial excavation company, and on-the-job training. I was trained by site assistants and supervisors. The quality of the teaching varied, with some better than others. I found that some did not have any patience for trainees, and this affected their teaching. During the placement module, I spent a week shovel scraping and was mostly used as a general dog's buddy. I have trained university students and archaeology enthusiasts. It was recognized as I was working at an archaeology field school. Any additional training I did was organized by myself. I have never been supported to increase my skills and knowledge. In fact, the first proper excavation job I had, the company would not hire me until I had a CSR card. I had to organize the training and pay for it myself. I do think having this statement incorporated into CIFA policy will make a difference. MES companies will no longer have a loophole to get out of providing appropriate training. Having structured and effective training, not only for trainees but also throughout your career, benefits the profession as a whole. If we want other professions such as architects, engineers and the like, to take us seriously, we must take ourselves seriously, and know our worth and value.
I learned my field skills on the job working for a unit, and for effectively 3 to 4 weeks, my colleagues carried me. It was a sink or swim situation, rather than going in and hitting the ground running. My colleagues were very understanding, and I owe them the experience I have now. They were experienced archaeologists, and, whilst surprised that I had been taken on, they were fantastic about showing me the ropes. I am now the co-director of a small unit where everyone is already experienced, so training others does not come up. I am not continually trained or supported to increase my skills and knowledge, as the need does not arise in a unit of a size. Everyone is highly trained in excavation work and has a specialism. Saying that, I have just become a qualified drone pilot, which is my first formal training course, not counting health and safety, since I started working in the profession in 2001. I believe that there is no point training in something that you are not going to use on a regular basis, as you will simply forget it. Honestly, I cannot see the proposal making any difference in the profession. The statement could be incorporated into policy and be an aspiration for registered organizations, but it strikes me
How would the proposal be enforced, and dare I say it, policed?
I've been lucky enough to work in quite a few varied roles within archaeology, as a commercial field archaeologist, as a community archaeologist, and as a finds specialist. How was I trained? Well, most of the time it's been on the job and fairly ad hoc. I was lucky when I first started out working for my local unit during university holidays that I had a really good set of POs who really cared about staff development and training young staff and trainees. But there was no sort of structured training program. It was really beneficial when I left university and was looking for a job. But again, once I got into commercial archaeology, great training from good POs and great project managers, but nothing really structured about it. It was only when I moved into community archaeology that, as part of the CBA bursary schemes, I did an MVQ. And at first I was pretty sceptical. I thought, why on earth am I doing an MVQ when I've already got a degree and years of experience? But actually it was pretty useful for structuring my learning and putting together a personal development plan, all that kind of thing. So it's a pretty positive experience all round, actually, despite my initial scepticism. Do I train anybody? Volunteers, student placements, supported internships for people with learning disabilities. They all bring their own challenges, and that's not something that's really recognised as part of my role. Can be a tricky one, that. Am I continually trained? Yes, my training is still ongoing, especially in finds, and I'm lucky to have some really good senior specialists who have a structured training programme for me sort of going forward. Would this policy be useful, rolled out across the board to all ROs? Yeah, I think however good your training is, it's no bad thing to have it structured. It means people don't fall through the gaps, and it's useful for everybody.